Welcome to Miles of Music. I'm Bob Miles. I'm here with the incredible jazz guitar of Joseph Federico. Joe, it's my honor.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in to do the show. First of all, I'm looking at this wonderful, wonderful guitar, this Gibson. What type is it, and tell me the history of this guitar with you.
It's a Gibson L5. It'll be 35 years old at the end of this year. This is my baby. And I have a second guitar like this, a little older, but this one plays the best for me. It's narrow neck, short chubby fingers. So I purchased it. I always said I would never buy a new one, but for some odd reason, this one, I was at the store when it was packaged and came in, and I bought it. That's how I got this guitar.
Great, great. And it's been loyal to you, I guess, all these years?
Yeah, this is the guitar I always use when I play.
Okay, okay. You have these sponge-type things in what are called the F-holes here. Tell me why that is, if you will.
Cuts down the feedback, and it cuts some of the bass swell that you get on in an amplifier sometimes. There are probably other ways to do this, but this is simple. It's worked for me. So.
Okay, okay. I've seen you play many times, and I'm afraid to say how far back. 25 years ago. And I'll never forget one of the funniest lines I've ever heard was from you. You looked up and you said, "This is an original composition, and if I don't play it, nobody else will." And I just remembered that. I don't know if you recall saying that.
No.
Very creative line right there. Tell me about your influences in music in general.
As far as my influences, I guess it was my teacher, Dennis Sandoli. I've heard, I like a lot of other musicians. I don't want to cut anyone out. I mean, if I enjoyed, for instance, Art Tatum is one of my favorites, the pianist, and Charlie Parker and so forth. But as far as direct influence, as far as guitar, it was Dennis. You knew him.
Yes.
I saw him as a student, and he was a marvelous musician, unbelievable musician. His ideas were unusual, his approach was unusual. And for me, just the way he taught, the way he played, clicked with me. Everyone comes out a little different. I mean, he was that kind of a teacher. But for me, watching him play, that was the way I wanted to play. I didn't want to mimic him, but there was just something in the way he presented his music that I liked.
Okay, and he taught so many legends in music.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the people?
Well,
or who were some of the people?
Everybody knows was John Coltrane. Charlie Parker took lessons there. James Moody. I met a lot of people there. I mean, the guitarists, I mean, Pat Martino was there. There's a guitarist, you know, Joe Lano
on
the West Coast. He was one of Dennis's students. Michael Warren. It's just, and a lot of them would come in and take consulting type lessons. You know, where they would be in town and take some lessons, and you'd be on the road or something.
Yeah, a who's who of guitar.
Yeah.
And any instrument, basically.
Yeah.
Coltrane saxophone and so
yeah.
forth. Yeah. What do you think you got most from Dennis, if I can ask that?
Conception. In other words, not technique I learned. He tells you how to place your hands. I worked a lot on that on my own, because you know, when you studied with Dennis, he wasn't there to count rhythms with you and tell you, you know, your fourth finger's too high, or you know, you're holding the pick wrong. Once he set that up, you were there. But it was the conception. It was how to play the tunes, how to be an unusual guitar voice, how to look for chords, do double notes, triple notes. He just had different ways of doing every tune that was a little different. And there's a recording that they just released a couple of years ago of his playing. It was recorded in the middle 50s. It was never released because the company said it was just wasn't like what anybody else was doing, and it still isn't. And if you hear that recording, you'll hear things that are still way ahead of their time. But it's not that you're going to listen to 1,000 notes a minute. It's nothing like that. But the conception of the way he did each of these original tunes was, you just sit there and you just don't believe where he came up with these ideas. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I got the most from.
And he had a brother as well.
Yes.
Adolf, right? Who taught piano?
Adolf was a saxophonist originally, and then I know he got rather proficient on the piano. But I think Adolf's was more interested in writing, arranging for bands, writing originals. He had his own orchestra, and they did jazz concerts, and he wrote quite a bunch of books.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's funny, you speak so highly of Dennis and what an influence, and yet I've heard so many people who have studied off of you that talk about you in the same regard. So it's funny how that passed on, and you passed that on. Yeah, yeah. And you're a very humble person, I've noticed, too, from the little bit I've spoken with you and seen you play. Would you like to play something?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just going to wing it through something.
Okay.
Suppose I start with maybe Blue Monk.
Okay. Fabulous. That was beautiful. I've noticed all these dark chords and all types of chords in there. And you attribute most of that to Dennis as well. Yeah, yeah.
You, when you study with him, he outlines things, and you're expected to extend it. So over the years, that was a good way to learn things, because now that he's not available, I can still practice. I still go through material. I still have things he left at the house, and I go through them and extend them, look for, and you learn how to find new things. That's the important thing. I don't want to be, I don't want to bore myself either. I mean, I can tell you can bore a listener sometime by playing it over and over, but I know I can bore myself. So I practice daily, and like I say, I'm always looking for another way to do something.
Sure. How much did you practice when you were studying?
Oh, it's hard to say, hours a day. I mean, every day, you never missed. But I loved it. I still love doing it. I still do it. I don't do as much because I have to teach now more. And but every evening I practice, and on the weekends and sometimes when I have like a light teaching day, I get a lot more done. But I do practice every evening.
Okay. What are some of the things you work on?
I have a little kind of a routine for myself. I have a 20-minute, I don't like to call it a warm-up because nothing warms you up until you've been playing a while, but I have a 20-minute routine that I do. It covers all types of picking things, stretching my hands, and so forth. And that's, say, 1/3. It's not necessarily 1/3 of the time I would practice, but that's one part of my routine. The second part is I try and work something new each week or two. Like I'll start with some new arpeggios or new scales and maybe work on some chord voicings and work them up around the guitar and so forth. And that's kind of like a lesson for myself. And then the third thing I will do usually is whatever project I'm working on. I mean, it might just be learning a couple of tunes. It might be a classical transcription that I've worked on or I'm working on. Something like that, some project.
Okay, okay. And with students, I obviously it depends on their ability and how long they've been playing and their backgrounds. But when you teach, is it somewhat from Dennis's conception, or is it different? Is it?
When I started with Dennis, I was rather young teenager, and he took me through fundamentals, like how to do tremolo, finger exercises, double notes, chord patterns, and so forth, reading. And that's basically the level that a lot of the students are. He had an improvisation outline. It's hard to find students that are ready to do that many hours a day that can keep that pace up, because people have asked me about teaching it. I've probably avoided teaching that way because it's too hard for most people. They're not ready for that. I know even as years went by with Dennis, he was a lot lighter on the students at the end. He said because they just were not able to seem like to handle what we handled back then. I mean, we had to do everything starting on the guitar, every finger, every position. That was 24 ways. But as years have gone by, I know he lightened up a little bit. He said because they're just not ready to do those kind of hours. So I do use some of his things back, like I say, the things that I first started with. I do those, and if a student gets far enough, I'll push him into the other things.
Okay. Blue Monk was obviously a blues by Thelonious Monk. Do you think the blues are important to learn as a guitar player, jazz blues?
Yes,
Okay.
Terribly.
Terribly.
I have the students do something when they get to the blues scales, write out different sets of changes, show them how to use the scales and apply them. But you have to do a blues slowly every day with no double time. It forces you to get a feel for the blues, and the no double time forces you to make a melody because you can't dazzle yourself with your technique, so you're forced to face a melody. If you can do that on a slow blues, get that feeling, the nuances that a blues has, just like a speaking voice. I mean, when we speak, there's pauses, you get louder and softer. That has to be in the music. A slow blues starts to nurture that, so that when a player later goes up and he's playing through a medium or an up-tempo tune, he doesn't sound like a mechanic. He can translate that, or it grows out of that. So that's important. And the blues is part of the feel of the music. It's got that dark, earthy feel, that little gospel touch to it, and so that's important as a stepping stone. I do a couple of minutes of blues every day. Never